I'm going to open the meeting of the Dartmouth Conservation Commission. This is our meeting of February 13, 2024. It's now 7 o'clock. We have a full quorum this evening. We have, in addition to myself, we have Commissioners Jim Fitchett, Nathaniel Watson, Richard Mallon, and Joseph Burke. So we have more than we need for our quorum. We are conducting this meeting remotely this evening, and that's as a result of Governor Healy signing into law on March 29, 2023, further extension for the hybrid remote meeting options for municipalities. She extended that option until March 31, 2025. And this public hearing is accessible. There's a raise your hand feature at the bottom. And in addition to that, you can just wave your hand in the picture, and we'll recognize you, unmute you, and you'll be able to have discussed whatever it is you want to say on a particular topic here this evening. This meeting was duly posted on the website at Dartmouth, so we have properly posted this meeting. That being said, we're now going to go through our administrative provisions, and the first is the approval of the minutes of the January 9, 2020 meeting. I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
With a seconded motion on the floor, we'll do a roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Joe? Joe, I don't hear you. We'll skip Joe for the minute. Rich?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a yes. Joe, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Says he's connecting to Views. He's got a technical.
Okay. Well, we have enough for that. We have 4 members voting, and that's what we need. So we'll go on to the next, which is the approval of the minutes of January 16, 2024. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
We have a second. We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And Joe is connecting to audio. Can you hear us, Joe? Not yet? We can't hear you, so that motion passes unanimously 4-0.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. You want to say yes?
Yes.
There you go. Now it passes unanimously 5-0. We have the next item of business of January 16, 2024, executive session. We have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. We're moving now to the approval of the field trip reports of January 9, 2024. I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
With a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. The final administrative item is to receive the minutes of the January 30th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Motion. Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes 5-0. We're moving on to our field trip reports. And the first is a request for extension permit for DEP file 15-2350. That's REP 24-1. It's from Richard Rayu, care of Fall River 5-cent Savings Bank, DBA Bank 5, for the construction of an office building with ancillary parking and landscaping within the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 183, lot 77-1. It's otherwise known as a 136 road. What is the recommendation that we have, staff?
Commissioners, this is the second requested extension on this particular file number. The first one was extended to February 24th, 2024. This is a new extension. No work has been done on the site. We did, in fact, reevaluate the wetland line, and it's still consistent with the original wetland line. At this point, I see no reason why not to recommend another 3-year extension to February 24th, 2027. However, I do know that the commission does not like to extend these over and over and over again. I think a second one is appropriate. We can revisit this issue if they ask a third time.
I would agree. I mean, at this point, specifically hearing that we don't have a change in the wetlands line as originally delineated, and I'm assuming there's been no changes in the regs that are pertinent to the proposal. I don't
Not
have
yet.
not yet, but it may affect
coming soon.
it may affect them in the future. But that's one of the reasons why the commission is reluctant to grant consecutive continuances. Things change over time, and you know, we don't like to see it stretched out that long, but we also understand sometimes, especially with commercial projects, things don't go as quickly as planned. Do any commissioners have any discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to extend the permit for DEP file 15-2350 for a period of 3 years ending February 24, 2027.
So moved.
We have a second. We have a seconded motion. We'll do a roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Joe? I'll skip Joe for the moment. He's blocked himself. Rich?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Joe, can you hear me? Well, that motion will pass 4-0.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Now it's 5-0. Motion.
I'm sorry,
passed.
Mike. I'm in a lobby of a resort and the noise is unbelievable. So I'm trying to mute myself so I don't interfere with the meeting. I have trouble unmuting myself.
Not a problem. I'll call upon you last and give you a chance when you hear the roll call vote.
Great.
Give you a
Thank
shot.
you. I'm sorry for the inconvenience.
I'm glad you're here, so don't worry about it. The second is a request for determination of applicability, RDA 24-3, from Richard Charon for permission to remove and replace an existing dock, construct an in-ground pool and associated site work within the flood zone and buffer zone of a salt marsh on land described as map 126 lot 152. It's at 10 Cranberry Lane. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request?
Before I make my recommendation, it sounded like you said remove a dock. It's a deck.
Oh, that's right. It is a deck. Thank
So
you.
just so everybody understands, it's a deck, not a dock.
That makes a big difference.
A little bit. Yeah, we looked at the wetland line under a wetland A1, and the wetland line was in fact actually no, we flagged the wetland line under a wetland A1, and they accepted the line as delineated, and they've designed accordingly. They're working in a lawned area of a house in a buffer zone behind a stone wall, and also upgrading of a wooded area that borders the salt marsh. It is land subject to coastal storm flowage, so it's not just a buffer zone question. Staff is recommending a -2 on this one with appropriate erosion control installed as per our standard condition.
Okay. Does any commissioner have any question? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to issue a -2 determination with the standard erosion control conditions.
So moved.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
We have a seconded motion. We'll do a roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously 5-0.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Our third field trip report, it's a request for certificate of compliance, DEP 15-2573, RCC 4-3. It's from Richard Rayum, Prime Engineering, to bring certain unauthorized site activities within the 100-foot buffer zone to a coastal bank and within land subject to coastal storm into jurisdictional compliance. It's on land described as map 129-28-22, otherwise known as 20 Spinnaker Lane. Mark, what is staff's recommendation for this?
Yes, just as a little background, there are several files in existence on 20 Spinnaker Lane. This is the first. This was in response to a certificate of compliance that was requested years ago, and there was, simply put, the plan of record showed a graded vegetated slope. In fact, there was a revetment built, a stone revetment along the easement access way to the beach that is used by the upgradient neighbors. I think Jim might be able to correct me if I've made any mistakes on that. There was also upgradient work done, in and around the house, just some general site work. Everything is in compliance with the revised plans, so the staff is recommending a complete COC. This does not include the deck area in the back. This does not include the beach nourishment or the planting of the beach grass. That's separate and distinct, and we'll be talking about those in the next couple of weeks.
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself from this.
Let the record reflect that Commissioner Fitch recused himself from this matter. So we have 4 folks left. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure on this? I think there's a recommendation from staff to grant the certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2573, RCC 24-3.
Motion for certificate of compliance for number 15-2573, RCC-24-3.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second motion. We're going to do a roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously 4-0. We're moving from the field trip reports now to the public hearings. And before we get started on that, Mark, on public hearing number 2, did we get a DEP file number?
We have not. I checked immediately before this meeting opened. We did not get one.
Okay, so anyone who's here for public hearing number 2, that's the Stephen Hegarty matter, which is the 98 Willis Street matter. We are not going to be able to close the public hearing since there is no DEP file number. We will certainly open it, but we can't close it. So there will be a continuation of the public hearing, probably until our next scheduled public hearing. I'll let you know at the time, but the next scheduled public hearing is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024 at 7 p.m. So now we're going to move to the first. Public hearing on DEP file 15-2719 NOI 24-3 from Horrigan Vega to construct a 16-foot by 32-foot in-ground pool and patio within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 117, lot 92-1. It's also known as 29 Prospect Street. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
A seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here this evening on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening. For the record, Terry McGovern from Zenith Land Surveyors, representing Vera Horgan, the applicant, and I'll share my screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I didn't disable you.
Okay.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay. Well, let's try it again. Let's see if I can get this up there.
Really?
Okay.
There we go. I can see it now.
Okay. Yeah. All right. This property and the property immediately west of it were originally permitted under a prior notice of intent filed a few years ago for the construction of the two houses. And what the purchaser of this house is proposing is to place a 16 by 32-foot rectangular pool immediately behind the right rear side of the house, some 10 feet off the property line, and put a patio against the house with a small apron surrounding the rest of the pool. The property itself, the backyard, is fairly level. There's not a lot of, in fact, there's not a lot of relief across the whole site. The BVW lies just south, just beyond an existing wooden fence, which they're actually going to pull inward and put a pool chain link fence around it, safety fence. That BVW constitutes kind of a low area. And as I scroll down, I'll just show you that down underneath our erosion control silt sock detail, there's a culvert that picks this up and carries it south down underneath Dallas Street and out the other side. So it's kind of a little isolated BVW that the neighborhood drains into, and again, is picked up by that culvert. We're showing very minimal proposed grading. Again, the patio and pool are proposed to be pretty much set at the existing grade. We do show silt sock wrapping down the property line across the back and back up towards the driveway on the other side. We do show a quote unquote construction entrance, which is something that Paul Duhart usually recommends because the excavation for this would probably be just done with an excavator or a small backhoe. Likely they'd probably either just put some stone down. They may not even go with a construction entrance, but we have to show it. It's something that Paul requires. So we believe all in all, there'll be a very minimal disturbance in the backyard, and there's not going to be really any anticipated change in grade back there. So I'll leave it at that for questions from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, I would like to hear staff's comments on this proposal.
Well, my first comment is I disagree with Terry. This is not an isolated wetland. In fact, that invert discharges below Dallas Street, daylights again, is piped again, and eventually makes its way down to the village and discharges into Apponeganset Bay. So to say that this is an isolated wetland, I think is a bit inaccurate. Secondly, my comment is that this is a very tight area with a very large house that was permitted by this commission. Terry is correct there, along with the neighbor to the west. And back on January 17th, when I first reviewed this plan, I indicated that I thought that the pool and patio being proposed was a little bit too large for this site, as it encroaches within 10 feet or so of the wetland line. Very close. We have a proposed patio adjacent to a deck. I just don't think that this, I have no problem with the concept of a pool in the backyard. I just think that this is a little large and can be downsized a bit. And at this point, I am not ready to recommend any kind of supportive order of conditions, as my comment on the 17th of January, which was posted on the portal, has never been responded to. It's just gone along, and I'm not surprised that I'm seeing the same plan tonight that I saw when I reviewed the file when it was first filed. We are putting in a lot of impervious area. The backyard is not a large backyard. It is a lawned area. And I just think that a little bit too much. Maybe there's a reorientation that can happen with the pool. I don't know, but this is probably not the best alternative, and the alternative that creates the most avoidance to the down gradient resource area, or in fact, the buffer zone to which we have jurisdiction under the bylaw.
So, yeah, Mark, I do recall when these, there's two homes. And
Right.
I believe they're immediately adjacent to what I call a auxiliary parking lot for the church across the
Yes,
street.
that's just to the east.
And I remember the discussion about those lots being very tight, and that the homes that were being proposed at the time being quite large in consideration for the size of the lot, particularly the size of the upland portion of the lot, or the non-jurisdictional portion. And I believe the fence that was alluded to was a fence required by the order of conditions, so that there would be no mistaking where the wetlands line actually was visually, because we anticipated that, because the folks who came in for that, I believe, were the developers, not necessarily I don't believe the current owners.
It was not, it was the developers.
So, we know that, once it goes in and it changes hands, people sometimes don't understand or forget what had been agreed to. So we wanted a visual marker there. But that being said, I mean, I will certainly allow, Terry, you can certainly comment on what Mark said, but I have to tell you, his comment about the size of the pool and the concerns we have about this pool being within 10 feet of the wetlands line, it's exactly the concerns that we articulated when we granted the order of conditions in the first place. So this is sort of like something we wouldn't have approved then. So I'm interested to see your comments, but I think that's a bit much, to be honest with you, for myself. I'm not speaking for the commission, but.
Well, first off, I certainly didn't intend to mischaracterize the BVW mark. I meant that there was no connection coming into it, that it drained outward through that culvert. So forgive me for that. With respect to the location and the orientation of the pool, the buyer of the property, I'm not sure she was aware of the process, but they asked us to go forward with it as it was and get a sense of what the commission might say. And certainly I think they might be open to reorienting it or changing the size of it. And I can certainly go back to them, having not been involved in the original permitting process, and not being aware of some of the concerns echoed then. We'd be happy to do that and continue to the next hearing. Again, not being part of the original process, I kind of suspected the fence might have had something to do with the original process, the post and rail fence that's out there. But, they asked us to go forward. By the time they did get back to us, it was already coming up towards this hearing, and I didn't want to go throwing in a revised plan at the last minute. So, I think with that, I'd be happy to continue it till the next hearing and go back to them and talk to them.
Well, I can only speak for myself, and I'll let the rest of the commissioners jump in after I've had my say, and then we'll open it up to the public.
Yeah, it's not set in stone by me by any means. So,
but I think that would be a wise move on your part on behalf of the applicants. And I'm not opposed to pools or a pool here even, but I think a pool, in my personal opinion, a pool that size, that close to the wetlands line, where we usually have a 25-foot no disturb, and this is only 10 feet away, so it's It's not 10 feet away because it's a septic system that can't be put anywhere else. This is a pool. It's a luxury item. So I'm not inclined to really allow that 25-foot no-touch zone, which is we've done for other folks consistently, except for things like a septic or an emergency, to be utilized for a pool. So I think reorientation and/or reduction in size, to me, it would make some sense. So anyway, any other commissioner going to be heard on this? Anyone in the audience want to be heard on this? I don't see anybody. So I do think it's a wise move. Do you think you could have your revised plans in so that you make our February 27th meeting?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So would you like us to continue this until February 27, 2024 at 7 p.m.?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Commissioners, I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing until February 27, 2024 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Jim,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're moving on to the second public hearing, and as I mentioned at the outset of the public hearings, this does not have a DEP file number, so we cannot vote on it this evening. It will have to be continued. But that being said, it's a public hearing on NOI 24-5. We do not have a DEP file number. It's from Stephen Hegarty to construct an addition and deck on a single-family dwelling within the 100-foot buffer zone to an inland bank and land underwater on land described as map 123, lots 105 and 105-1. It's otherwise known as 98 Willis Street. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Jim,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. And on behalf of the applicant.
Again, Terry McGovern from Zenith Land Surveyors representing Mr. Hagerty. And hopefully we can save a little bit of time on the 27th. Let me share screen. Okay, hopefully my plan is up there and visible.
It is.
And what the Hegartys are proposing is a small addition for a mudroom and some expanding dining area if you were standing on the street, it would be to the right rear of the existing house with a deck located immediately off the rear of that. There's a paved driveway in which part of this addition will be cut into and removed in order to contain the mudroom. And the resource area is a corridor of vegetation here to the west, associated with a drainage ditch that comes down from Willis Street and then flows down to Adams and beneath Adams. There is another resource area beyond Adams that I had originally shown, and Mark noted that it might actually serve to confuse things. But since it does kind of show up on not only the assessors mapping, but the DEP wetlands mapping, et cetera, it is well out beyond the buffer zone. So I removed that line just to simplify things, because these flaggings along the west side are the most critical ones and the closest. The edge of the deck in this case will be, get this to blow up a little bit. 31 feet from just about flag number 1. The deck will be constructed on sonotubes, but the addition will be, actually, I believe I think I have a note on here that the whole addition is actually to be on sonotubes, both the mudroom and the deck. So there won't be a lot of excavation going on here, not like you would have a good size 8-foot pour for a foundation and a basement. We are showing again the required siltation detail and wrapping that from the driveway around and back up on the other side. No proposed grading associated with this. The site itself is fairly flat. It's very wide open. There's no removal of vegetation required. And again, minimal disturbance because this will be placed on sonotubes. With that, I'll leave it back to Mark and the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, I'd like to hear staff's comments on this proposal.
Yeah, I think Terry described it correctly. We do have a drainage ditch with an inland bank, vegetation within the inland bank. It's been flagged via an A1. There is a wetland to the south of the site, off-site, so we could not flag that. The buffer zone does extend north from that unflagged wetland into the backyard area. Really has no merit on this particular case, as the entire site pretty much falls within the buffer zone of the bank to the intermittent stream. So, you know, I think this plan is much clearer than the other plan was, or the original plan. Having said that, if we had a file number, I would probably be giving you a supportive recommendation, you know, of a standard order with erosion control. And there is, if you scroll down the plan, that they are putting a detail of the erosion control entrenched hay bale or hay bale or wattle and silt fence. So I would see myself recommending approval, but I am not going to do that at this time until we get a file number.
Makes sense. Thank you, Mark. Do any commissioners have any questions? I don't see any. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this project tonight? I don't see or hear anybody. So at this point, with the applicant's permission, I'd entertain a motion to continue this public hearing until Tuesday, February 27, 2024 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Absolutely.
Second.
Motion. So we'll do a roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening.
You too. That concludes the public hearing. We're now moving on for items for discussion. And the first item for discussion is a bill to WB Mason for copy paper of $327. I'll entertain a motion to authorize or the payment of the bill for $327 for WB Mason's copy paper.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. The next item for discussion was an RDA filing fee waiver request by McGregor, Legree, and Stevens PC. It's regarding the New Bedford Rifle Range site, map 33, lot 19. The town administrator, and Mark has sent me a copy of the correspondence, was alerted to this fact and the fact that there were CR discussions with Buddy Baker Smith for potential townwide strategy. So we're seeking advice on that one, but I guess that's the alert to let us know that somebody's asked for a request for determination of applicability, and they're not the property owner. We don't even know who they are. They could be abutters, but they're seeking a determination on someone else's property. Did I say that right, Mark?
Pretty close. I don't think the Buddy Baker part was part of it, but
I'm just reading from what it said here.
oh, okay.
So I don't know what happened. Can you guys?
No, that's a second bullet. You read two ticks. Okay, it's just It's just the first tick, not the second line.
Oh, well, my thing was, I'm looking at it, it says alerted, it's all one line, and then the next line says RHCC maintenance with work potential.
The intention was this.
I got it. I understand what you tried to do.
Okay.
Um, so I don't have a problem to that at all. So Buddy Baker's not in it. So did I say what was right or should be right regarding the
There's an I'll read it. RDA filing fee waiver request by McGregor, Legere, and Stevens, PC, for the New Bedford Rifle Range site, map 33, lot 19. That's it. Caroline Smith is on. I think I got that right. Correct, Caroline?
Yes, thank you. And I'm here to, if anyone has any questions, to answer.
why should we waive the fee?
So a couple reasons. First and foremost, this was asked a $600 fee. We believe that this waiver, your regulations do allow you to waive it. We believe that this waiver is in the public interest regarding the activity at the rifle range, shooting bullets that may contain lead, zinc, copper into what we believe is probably a buffer zone. It's also in a wellhead zone 2 aquifer area, and could be contaminating potential groundwater and public drinking water supply. So we do think it is in the public health and safety. I certainly do represent some concerned residents of Dartmouth. And secondly, we do believe that I'm not exactly sure how the fee was arrived at, but I did see from the commission's filing fee policy document that there is an entry for $600 filing fee for categorized as any activity associated with a commercial project where a valid wetland delineation exists. This is kind of a unique situation. This is not the proponent of a project. This is myself as the applicant filing on behalf of my clients. So no development, no project is proposed. So we don't think this really fits into the situation of a commercial project. And certainly we don't know of a valid wetland delineation at the moment. Happy to, if someone has clarification, if I'm incorrect on that categorization, happy to hear it and respond to that. Thirdly, as I mentioned, this is not your typical RDA. This is submitted on behalf of my clients who are concerned residents of Dartmouth on a parcel of land with the rifle range owned by the city of New Bedford. And I think it just goes with the spirit, a waiver would go in the spirit of the Wetlands Protection Act, the state act, which doesn't impose an RDA filing fee. I understand that towns typically do impose fees, but we think this fee, given that this is an RDA basically asking for a decision on the papers that we've submitted, we feel it's a bit unreasonable and excessive to cover the processing costs of an RDA on the papers, not asking anyone to go out there and confirm wetland delineation. So in conclusion, we think it's in the public interest and consistent with the intent of the bylaw to protect the resource areas in the drinking water in Dartmouth.
Is anyone you're representing a public charity?
No.
Municipality?
No.
Okay, because that's really what the waivers thing was all about, more than anything else. But I understand your argument is that first it's excessive. Well, that may be the case, in terms of the number of hours that are usually spent by staff on these requests. I don't think it is, but I understand your argument, because the fees really are trying to compensate the town for the costs involved in making a determination. And that's, if you think about it, not a whole lot of time, because you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. That would basically buy about an hour's time All right, and the town will spend far more than that on trying to make this determination. So, you know, we could have people coming in my view, on almost everything, saying, we don't think it's reasonable for you to charge me that much to do this. Well, where does it end? You know, we'll be fighting on all these fees. The fees, to my, whether it's reasonable or not, I'm not even going to entertain that as a realistic goal. To me, the issue here is whether or not you're basically pursuing some public purpose that would enable us to say, yeah, in this case, we can waive the fee. I'm not convinced, but I'll be open to other commissioners' comments on this, and staff's. I mean, you know, what recommendation.
Well, if I could speak.
Right, we mostly certainly can.
First, I would agree with Caroline that this is not a typical RDA. And it's not a typical RDA for a number of reasons. Yes, there's no activity proposed and things of that nature. However, this is an RDA being applied for on a site which has a long-standing historic and well-known use, and has been under both political and public scrutiny for alternative uses relative to economic benefit and also environmental benefit. In addition, the question of groundwater protection, the jury is really out. DEP has never really come in here and questioned the use or the water quality issues, nor have we as a commission been given any data that indicates that the water quality is being contaminated by the ordinance that's on site. Nobody denies that there is an ordinance and spent cartridges on site. And lastly, just to the east of this site are water supply wells operated by the town of Dartmouth. At no time has the water department ever issued us any kind of data or any kind of concern indicating that there is contamination in the wells. We have issued 2 permits on this site previously, and neither one was appealed. Both were approved. At this point, I don't know how we can just go out there and all of a sudden say, stop what you're doing. This has been going on for a long time. Having said all that, I think that this waiver is inappropriate. I understand why it's being asked, but I think it's inappropriate because staff has in fact spent an innumerable number of hours trying to get the context of this site, knowing that this site has been part of a decision signed by former Governor Baker regarding economic development for the city of New Bedford. It just concerns me that at this juncture we're trying to determine what may or may not be jurisdictional today, since permits were issued before. This is a commercial use. The site is used as a rifle range, and the city of New Bedford does collect fees from private citizens, organizations, and other police departments, from what I understand. And in fact, there is a valid wetland delineation on the site already from the 2022 determination of applicability that was approved and not appealed by this commission. And there was a delineation, a greater delineation back in 1991, 1992 that an order of conditions was based on. So while this request doesn't cleanly fit into every category, the 4 categories which I submitted to you for RDA filing fees, I think it most closely represents and is arguably consistent with the 4th, any activity associated with a commercial project where a valid wetlands delineation exists, and that would be the $600 fee. And I would recommend to the commission that we hold to that.
Thank you, Mark. Any commissioners that want to be heard on this? I don't see any.
Mr. Chairman, if I just may I make one more comment?
Sure.
I just, in conclusion, I'll just say, well, I understand that there have been some permits issued. You know, it's my understanding that the commission has not looked at whether the activity of shooting is altering a resource area. And so again, I'll just reiterate that I think this waiver is in the public health and safety and the public interest. The purpose of the bylaw is to protect wetlands, related water resources in Dartmouth by controlling activities deemed by the commission likely to have a significant or cumulative effect of wetland values, including public and private water supply, groundwater, and pollution. I think the cumulative effect of 100 years of activity warrants some consideration and is in the public interest of Dartmouth residents. So thank you.
Well, I just want to ask a question because staff brought it up. Are you willing to present this evening the data to support the concerns that there has been pollution as a result of the rifle range activities? Because otherwise we're on a fishing expedition and you want the town to front the money to do it on behalf of abutters. Not inclined to grant the waiver on that basis. If you have data that's been gleaned from, scientific study through engineering or biologists, and you want to present it to show that, hey, there has been a negative impact on your water supply as a result of the activities, I'm willing to reconsider my opinion. But other than that, I'd have to agree with the recommendation of staff. The most appropriate thing is not to waive the fee.
So I do not have data at this point proving any contamination of water supply. I think you may be overlooking the wetland contamination itself, but no, tonight I do not have the data, but I don't necessarily think this is a fishing expedition on taxpayers' dollar, but we do have a wetland consultant.
Do you have scientific data regarding the pollution to the wetlands area as a result of the rifle range? I mean, and I'm saying pollution with quotation marks because I'd like to know specifically what the pollution is and how it's damaging the wetlands. And that would also be the scope of the pollution. I mean, you have to, if you're going to use the argument you want to use, you have to say, and here's what we've done. Here's what we're showing you is the concern. I understand you have a concern, but to me, that's just a concern without any data to support it. And our fees are, like I said earlier, picked out of thin air. They're picked to compensate the town for the cost it takes to process these requests appropriately, study them. And as Mr. Garrett has said, he's already spent hours to research this particular site to be prepared to talk about it. That's not inconsequential. I mean, the town has an obligation to listen to the complaints, listen to the arguments, and we will do that as fair and independently as we can. But I haven't been convinced that there should be a waiver of the fee in this case. And if the fee is paid and the application is made, we'll give that serious and listen to the information presented. Okay, and listen to the information presented. We give it serious and fair deliberation. We always have for every applicant before this commission. But I'm personally not convinced that a waiver is in order, but I'll entertain a vote on that because I don't think it's Mike Kehoe's, decision. It's the commissioner's decision of this Conservation Commission. So we always phrase our motions in the positive. So entertain a motion to approve the requested fee waiver on this particular matter. And I understand it's a $600 fee waiver. I'll entertain that motion if someone makes it.
So moved.
A second on it.
Second.
With a seconded motion. Gonna do a roll call vote. So the roll call vote will be Jim,
No,
Richard,
Recuse myself.
okay, Nat,
No.
Joe,
No,
and I'm a no. That motion fails. The request is denied.
Thank you.
Now we're going to the thing I tried to read into the first one. Alerted the town administrator regarding the CR discussion with Buddy Baker Smith for potential townwide strategy. So Mark, I'll let you elaborate on that.
It's just really an alert to you guys. I had a discussion with the town administrator about this because I do believe, as we discussed, it's a bigger issue than just Buddy Baker talking to the Conservation Commission. This speaks to, what our open space strategy is and what we want it to be moving forward relative to conservation restrictions and the level of commitment that the town wants to make to conservation restrictions under the new Healy administration's I don't want to say edict, but their new concerns about how conservation restrictions have not been implemented appropriately. So town administrator was in agreement, and we're going to try to convene a meeting in the next few weeks when I return from my trip, and we're gonna see what we can come up with and brainstorm. I did send, and hopefully everybody received, the boilerplate CR from the state for your reading pleasure, just to see what goes into that. And that's what the state typically requires. Towns can amend that, but pretty tough to delete some of those things. So that was that.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you, Mark. I appreciated the fact you sent it out. Then we have the RHCC maintenance work potential filing.
Yeah, this is a just an update. Round Hill Corporation, as you know, Mike Gagne was the executive director of the corporation. He has since resigned, and they have a new director. So they're reviewing all their open orders and things of that nature and closed orders. And they have some projects in and around the dry dock, seaplane ramp, parking area to the beach. They also have ongoing storm damage. If you recall, I believe last year, we agreed to allow them to flush cut wood and metal that's now protruding from the beach due to beach erosion. Given the number of storms we've had to date this winter and late fall, they have additional materials protruding. It is a public safety matter, and they need to address that. Most of the stuff that they want to do, the orders of conditions that originally covered them allowed for ongoing maintenance after the sunset of the order of conditions. So just letting you know that there will be some activities down there which they can do in compliance with the permits that were issued. However, there are some additional things they want to do, and they have retained Alan Haru as their consulting engineer. So we probably will be seeing some additional filings from Round Hill for some activities, basically for coastal resiliency, coastal stabilization, and coastal repair. So that's pretty much that update.
So that's just a heads up.
That's a heads up. Yeah, nothing particular.
And then we have the draft wetland bylaw discussion.
Yes, and Attorney Cruz is here.
I see him.
I think.
I see his name. I should be more clear about that.
Now you see me.
Okay, now I can see you.
Just as a lead in, I forwarded to you all the updated revisions by Attorney Cruz. This after our previous discussions and some discussions that he and I had. Of note, a lot of concern on how buffer zone is going to be handled through the RDA. I think I reported to the commission that I had on my own drafted an addendum to the RDA form, which I think its intent was to cover the buffer zone issues as related to the bylaw and not the act. I think, I don't want to put words into Brian's mouth, but I think conceptually he thought that was a good idea. He has made some red line revisions, and I have no problem with the red line revisions as he's made them. It was really a document for discussion and, consideration to minimize a draconian change in a pretty significant portion of our bylaw. That's what I got to say.
Okay.
So I'm happy to talk about the most recent drafts. But that being said, I'm also happy just to entertain questions and hear what you guys' thoughts are. The premise of these revisions was to incorporate essentially what Mark did with his proposed local addendum for negative and positive determinations. And what that addendum does is still allows you to do conditions on certain types of negative determinations, but those negative determinations are reflective of maintaining the distinction and jurisdiction in the buffer zone between the bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. So those particular negative determinations that still allow you to do conditions would apply both in the buffer zone and to the resource areas. And what this has done, therefore, is change the way the negative determinations operate under the bylaw, and then also really tweak the way things work in the bylaw in relation to minor projects, and essentially providing you the opportunity to create limited projects that wouldn't need to go through the full permitting process. The only one that exists currently that you would need to create regulations for would be utility work. You could expand beyond that if you wanted to, but there's no obligation to do so. But the idea is to create a non-permitting process that allows you to sign off quickly on certain types of things with certain standard conditions. And if you need to go beyond those standard conditions, then that in and of itself is demonstrative of the fact that you need a full permit process. So if you want to, I guess I will summarize by saying this. If you want to keep the same general concept of how you've been operating on small projects, especially small projects within the buffer zone, like septic replacements, that type of thing, with the ability to do conditions on them without a full permit process, but you also don't want to change the jurisdictional nature of the bylaw in relation to the buffer zone, then this is your solution. And if you don't like this, then we need to figure out a different way for you to be doing things moving forward. Because I have tried to the best of my ability, encapsulate what you're currently doing without creating fundamental changes to the nature of the bylaw. That was the intent anyway. I'm happy to answer questions or suffer your slings and arrows, whichever you choose.
Well, I rather throw rose petals because I like the way it was done. I think it allows us to accomplish what we wanted to without jeopardizing the integrity of the bylaws. And I'm inclined to just adopt it at this point and forward it to town meeting. I think it's a refinement that makes it a better amendment than it was before it saw your eyes. So there we go. I'm okay with it.
Brian, I just had one question. I don't mean to cut any other commissioners off.
Sure.
But you use the term limited project.
Yeah, and I was just trying to mirror what the DEP does. We can call it something else if you want.
My take was that we have under, 1024 and 1053 of the Act, general provision limited projects, and there is a cadre of them.
Yes, there's dozens, yeah.
I'm a little concerned that if we use that same term in the bylaw, I mean, it would be correct. I just think it would be awfully confusing.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, we could say, if you want to delineate, you could say minor project. Just, or, you know, minor work or something else, like just some unique term that makes it clear it's a bylaw thing, not a WPA thing.
yeah, I just, that
Yep.
really like, I say, oh no, this is not going to be good. I can see limited project being a problem down the road.
Or you could call it a bylaw limited project. I mean, you could be explicit like that if you wanted to. I'm not, you know,
Yeah, okay.
I'm not beholden to particular nature of the verbiage, and I'm not the, you know, authorial intent here. So,
Yeah.
I'm happy to change it to be clear that it's not. There's no confusion over it being a WPA limited project. The purpose of it's much more important than the actual title of the provision.
Anyone else want to be heard?
I'm largely happy with it, and I've read through most of the comments, but I guess, are there any trade-offs we have to accept with this new writing? It sounds like we're kind of getting everything we want, Brian, but I just want to make sure.
So the trade-off is this. In order to, the only way that I felt this worked, where you're not creating the situation where you have a backdoor permitting process without it being a permit, is to not allow you to, in each situation, for whether it's a project that has minimal impact or whether it's a limited project, not allowing you guys to come up with other conditions you want for each application. Because if that's the case, then you could have been, the exception is going to end up swallowing the rule, and you could end up having something where it really should have been a permitting process, and you've created dozens of conditions to account for that fact. So the limiting factor is, by regulation, you're going to have to come up with what those standard minimal conditions are for a -3, and the standard conditions are for -4. And if you can't just apply those conditions and be satisfied with them, then you're going to have to do a positive determination and make them get a permit. That's going to be your what's going to constrain you in the negative determination process. And I think Mark's in agreement with me on that if you can't operate within the certain limited conditions that you come up with ahead of time, it really should go through the permitting process.
Yeah, I would state for the record that if you have more than 2 conditions, then it's not a negative determination. It's a positive determination. I mean, and most of the time we're dealing with a project that we're telling them put erosion and control devices in and you'll satisfy. So it's a very limited number.
And the second issue you're going to have to accept is, if you don't want to change things jurisdictionally, is, you know, you guys have typically been doing this when it's like a septic system and a buffer zone, and it's like, oh, we can just do some conditions on erosion control and sediment control and be done with it. No big deal. You're going to have to allow that in the resource area as well, that they can put that, you know, that minimal project that only needs sediment erosion control conditions, they could get a -3 in the resource area as well as the buffer zone. Because if you don't allow that, then you are changing the buffer zone jurisdictionally. And that's a different can of worms we'd have to address. So the buffer zone, the resource area always have to be treated the same currently. So that's your second issue, is there's going to be some projects in the resource area that you might not have thought of as being a negative determination before, which are becoming a negative determination.
I would only say to that, Brian, that would only happen under bylaw filings, because if it was a state and bylaw filing, they're going to be restricted by the impacts that they are allowed under the state, and they would have to replicate those impacts.
Yes.
So
what's interesting is, by the fact that we're delineating out negative determinations under the bylaws being different, there could be situations where you get a negative determination under the WPA, but you still need a permit under the bylaw because it impacts the buffer zone too much. Alternatively, you could have a negative determination under the bylaw because it meets your minimal condition requirements. But the WPA is going to require an order of conditions. So this is really acknowledging, what we're doing now is acknowledging that jurisdictionally, the two are not the same between state and local. And so you're not going to get this synchronicity of outcomes under the two anymore, like has been happening. You're going to really have to acknowledge that you're getting different approvals or not approvals under each regime for the same project sometimes. So that may induce people to go, well, there's no point in me trying to get a negative determination under the bylaw if I'm not going to get one in this state anyway, so I might as well just file for my permit. I don't know. Yeah. So you're hamstrung in the sense that if you want to reflect this, what you've been doing, then you have to reflect it everywhere and not just in the buffer zone.
And I think that staff would probably advise away from an RDA if there were going to be different outcomes under the state and the local bylaw. We would need to make them aware of that, which is fine.
And that would be a choice they could make, but from a drafting perspective,
I understand. I get it.
We have to give them the option of if they want to be kind of silly and go that route, they can, or they don't have to. But the bylaw has to assume that they may ask for that option where they get an RDA in one and not in the other.
Understood.
So,
understood.
And it may be that in 4 or 5 years in practice, you see that something's not really happening in a certain way, and we can address it then. But I can't account for everything because this is going to be a new way of operating, and things are going to pop up, and we'll tweak it as we need to. But if you want to keep the buffer zone and resource areas the way they are now, and you want to be able to do these minimal negative determinations with conditions without them with the permit process, this is about it. There's no other way I can see doing it.
Mark, one other quick question. How impactful would this change be to the folks who are making the app or the applicants? Is this like, it's not really going to make much of a difference in terms of day-to-day activity, or is it more something that's going to require some education?
You're breaking up. I didn't hear what you said. Try again. Sorry.
My question was, how impactful would this be to the applicants? And would it change, like, would this require a lot of education, or is this not really that material in terms of how they understand existing rules and process, I should say?
Applicants are applicants, and they are getting less sophisticated by the minute. So I can't say it won't be impactful. However, for the average applicant, it shouldn't matter. It's just an extra sheet of paper that we have to check off. I mean, it's not. Typically, what happens in these is, their engineer or they come in and they say, well, what should we file for? And we go through an analysis and say, we think that you're probably going to need to file a notice of intent, or an RDA will suffice. I think that it will affect, and not dramatically, but it will affect how we advise them. It doesn't matter. They're just going to get another sheet of paper, and determinations are not recordable, so it doesn't matter. It's not an extra sheet that they got to pay for. We'll just issue it with the addendum on it, as per the bylaw, and off they go.
Yeah, and it's not a long appendix either. So I was just asking just in terms of practical terms how it would impact your life and the applicant's life, but no more.
Little to none on both. I mean, know.
Okay. Nothing else from me.
Anyone else? Okay.
So there are a few comments that I was hoping for clarification on. If it's possible, just go through those quickly.
Sure.
If you guys can bear with me for 10 or 15 minutes. one question is, how do you want to do public notice for the hearing? Do you want it to just be mailed to the applicant and the abutters? Do you want it to be published in the paper? Like how you want to just mirror exactly what you have to do for the WPA? Because technically you have discretion on how you want to do that through the bylaw.
Well, right now, we just post a legal ad in the newspaper for RDAs. We've been doing that right along.
Sure. What I'm saying is for, you know, RDAs, permits, everything, the bylaw can specify whether or not you need to post for the public hearing in a particular way. So if you want to have more requirements, less requirements, you have discretion at this point to tailor the public notice process how you think makes sense. And if you want to just say, we're going to do it the same way as the state requirement, that's fine. But I wanted to know if you guys wanted to change that, because now would be the opportunity to do so.
My recommendation to the commission is to leave it as is.
I agree. I think it's going to be more confusing for applicants and particularly engineers and maybe even us. So I just assume leave it as is.
Okay. The next question is, I raised as a possibility, but I'm assuming you want to keep the permit language rather than calling it a local OOC in an application rather than a local notice of intent. Some towns have done that to try to minimize the contrasting nature of it. But I want to give you the option of doing so. My recommendation at this point, though, given how we are keeping things distinct on a substantive level, is that it probably is useful to keep the terminology distinct as well. But given that this is a complete overhaul of the bylaw, if you were considering changing the language, terminology of the application process and what's issued, now would be the time to do so. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here, but if you were considering doing it, it would be now.
My recommendation to the commission is to keep them distinct as they are now.
Agreed. I think that's the right way to do it.
Agree.
I mean, one of the things that we have to deal with on a political basis is we're going to stand up in front of town meeting, and Brian knows this all too well. And if there are too many questions and they don't understand it, they're going to vote it down. I mean, it's just that's the default action of town meetings throughout the Commonwealth. So I would, if it works as it is, I would say leave it as it is, just to keep it consistent, less explaining.
Also consistent with why we started this process to begin with, right? I mean, we had certain things we wanted to accomplish. If we accomplish them with the way it's been drafted, I just as soon do that and leave it.
Next thing I need to know is if you can't hold a public hearing within 21 days due to a lack of quorum, within how many days after that do you want to have to hold the public hearing? And I highly recommend providing an actual time frame, so there's no fights over whether or not you've held it in time or delayed things intentionally. And you can give yourself a good window. This is not there's nothing obligating you to give a short time frame, but I would recommend putting a time frame in for when you have to hold a public hearing after a failure due to a quorum issue. It could be 60 days, 90 days, but you need to have a time frame in there so that no one can complain that you're sitting on it intentionally by saying that you don't have a quorum.
Well, we can say 60 days, but our practice has been the next public hearing.
Sure. And that's fine. And I'm not saying you don't have to do that. What I'm saying is just saying, we'll meet the next time we can without giving a time frame. Someone's going to, try to claim that you're doing something intentionally towards them by using ambiguous language, or some future iteration the commission 10 years from now may actually try to do that. So I would just rather have a specific time frame, and I think 60 days is fine.
60 days is fine, because that's for us, that's going to be at least four public hearing dates. And if we can't generate a quorum, then we probably should think about disbanding the commission. We go 4 or 5 times in a row without having a quorum.
Next question. Your allowance that for permits that landscaping and system maintenance can continue after the expiration of the permit. Do you want to expand that to negative determinations as well, given that some things are going to be effectively approved through negative determinations? Do you want it to be clear in the bylaw that, that type of stuff, if it was approved pursuant to negative determination, -3, -4, that stuff can continue after the expiration of the negative determination as well? Because right now there is potentially a loophole where, or do you want them, if they get a negative determination, it is 3 years. And if they have to keep doing stuff after that, then they have to come back again. I just want to make sure you're aware that would be an intentional choice you're making in the language now. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but I want to make sure that I know for sure what you guys want in that situation.
I would think with that, I would say let them come back after it expires. Because if they're already doing something and it's done, I don't think they're going to come back. If it's ongoing, they should come back, because we have issues that I think need to be addressed, which is, has anything changed?
Sure.
That's me. I mean, what do you think, Mark?
Well, I guess it would have to be a condition and a determination, would it not, Brian?
It would be if you allowed.
Or we could do it in the bylaw. We could just allow it through the bylaw. Right.
So my point is like, say like someone comes for septic approval that you're giving them -3, 4 because you can give conditions relating to erosion control, sedimentation, that's sufficient. But part of doing that is they have to, they're proposing that they would be doing, landscaping maintenance around the septic tank itself to maintain access. And do you want them to be able to just do that in perpetuity, even after the thing expires in 3 years? Or are they gonna have to come back after 3 years to get approval again to be able to access the tank?
I don't think staff is set up to, check out every time somebody puts 3 new shrubs in around a septic system. I mean, I think that just becomes impractical.
So my point is, right now, if it was a permit approval, that could continue after the expiration.
Right.
But a negative determination, which is still in some instances an approval, it can't continue. They have to come back after 3 years. So is that intentional, or is that something we should close as a loophole?
No, I think that's intentional. I mean, if they want to put in new shrubs at the 4 or 5 years later, come back for another determination. We'll see whether it's still not, negative. It could be changes in the wetlands line for all we know. There could be, if they come in and get a proposal before us and we say, no, it's a negative determination with the condition, whatever we say, they go do it. And they want to put something else, do something else later on, come back. It's not, it's not like come in for this, get blessed once, and then you don't have to worry about it ever again. So I think we went on purpose to have them come back. I don't think that's a mistake.
I'm fine with it.
They may get another one that says negative too. I mean, they may actually get one, so it's not they're doing anything wrong.
So next question is, I had put language in originally saying if the commission finds the applicant's proposal, this is for a permit, is unlikely to have significant effect on wetlands values, then the commission shall approve the permit and may include such conditions as it sees fit. And that language got deleted. And my comment to that is, you don't have to have my language, but I feel like you need to say what you can or should or must do or can't do if you find that the proposal is unlikely to have a significant effect, because you can't assume that they're going to like file for a negative determination on that. They might file for a permit, and you're going to have to account for, you get a permit application, you look and go, well, this isn't going to do anything. So do you want to have to approve those? Do you still want to have discretion to not approve them? The bylaw needs to account for that scenario. And so I just need direction on what it is you want to have to do, be able to do, not be able to do. If you get a permit application where you determine there's going to be no significant effect on the wetlands values, what is the game plan in that situation?
Well, if they've asked us whether or not it has any, for determination, we give them a negative determination.
No, I'm saying if they apply for a permit.
Well, if they apply
for a permit and you find that there's going to be no significant effect on the wetlands values after they apply for a permit,
then we give them an order of conditions.
So do you want the bylaw to say you have to do that? Like it's an automatic, yes, they get it if you make that determination. That was kind of my feeling.
We'll limit ourselves.
Okay. So
I mean, if they're coming in on an order of conditions, that means they've given us a notice of intent. We investigate, Mark investigates, and we see what the applicant's proposing, and we don't think it's going to have any negative impact. We grant the order of conditions. I don't think, if there's something else that somebody has a problem with, they think it doesn't meet, the performance standards, or okay, then bring it up. But if they meet the conditions, they'll grant it. I mean, we grant it. I just say, bring it. I don't want to limit us. Who knows what the circumstances may be in the future. But I mean, we've never said, well, we don't like Joe. So, I mean, let's say no to Joe because we really don't like him. But we'll say okay to Marty because Marty's a good guy. He got the same project. We've never done that. Now, if you want to put it in the bylaws that you have to do this, then we've got less flexibility. And I thought that was one of the big concerns we had, if I'm not mistaken, in the emails about, hey, be careful because right now you got flexibility to deal with things, and what you're proposing to do is going to take away that ability. I was like, okay, let's keep our flexibility.
So again, I'm not saying what I proposed has to be there. What I'm saying is you have to account for the situation, because what currently says, the bylaw says, as with that deletion, is you first have to make a determination of whether there's significant impacts on the wetlands values. That's number one. Then number two, it says, if you find that it will have a significant effect, then you have to deny unless you can sufficiently condition. Okay. So then my second question is, if you find that there's no significant effect, then what happens? That's what I want to know so I can put it in the bylaw. I don't care what the answer is. I need to know because the bylaw has a gap in it currently. So if there's a significant effect, you find that, make the determination, then you have to deny unless you can sufficiently condition to protect the wetlands values. If you find that there is no significant effect on the wetlands values, then what?
I'd like to keep
What's that?
It is. I don't see it as a gap because we're saying if you come in and we don't think there's any significant impact on the wetlands, I'm saying to you is if they come in on a request for determination of applicability, then it's likely to get voted as a negative determination. If it comes in the context of a notice of intent, we may have conditions on it. We may not. I don't want to put us in a position where it says, well, we have to then give you the approval. We may have approval with conditions.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the bylaw has to say it's approved.
Suggesting it's going to actually encourage litigation. I don't want to do it. I'd rather have that gap. I'm sorry, I disagree with that, but that's my feeling.
Then what I would suggest is that it be made clear that the significant impact determination is part of the permit approval process. And if you have found that significant impact, then this is the course you have to take. And other than that, the bylaw is not talking about it. Because I don't care if the bylaw doesn't talk about it, but it's not clear to me right now that the bylaw is intending not to talk about it. It almost looks like, so I want to be clear that that's intentional then. And I'm going to tweak the language to make that clear.
Well, I always thought it was. I thought it wasn't.
I think it was clear in the maybe in the existing bylaw as redrafted the way it's the my concern is the section subsections the way it's laid out. I'm going to reorganize that, and I think you're going to see how it flows better and makes that more clear. But I get what you want out of that, and I can do that. That's no problem.
All right.
Brian,
Do
what page are
Yeah.
you on right now?
Sure. In the PDF, I'm on page 8.
Okay, could I make a comment on page 8?
Sure.
We're there, and it's a structural comment. In reading this, we have C, determinations. C1, a negative determination. C2, a positive determination.
Yep.
I'm thinking because the form leads with a positive determination, should we switch the order of those? So that 1 is the positive determination text and 2 is the negative determination text, which aligns with the way the addendum form is. The first subset is positives, the second subset is negatives.
There's no legal requirement, but if you think it makes it less confusing, I don't have a problem with doing that.
I just think it flows better and it's more consistent.
The next question I have is, do you want to make clear, because you have a provision saying economic hardship, topography, site conditions, and shape of parcel should not be a consideration in a permanent application decision. Do you want to mirror that language for determinations as well?
I would say yes.
I would too.
And then we have language saying that for permits that everything has to be undertaken in accordance with the reference plan, and that you can't commence the work until the permit has been recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Do you want to apply those requirements to negative determinations as well?
Determinations are not required to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
But you could make them required under our bylaw.
I don't care about that. I do care about, though, that the thing about the plans you said makes some sense because they've submitted plans to say, do you think this is going to require a notice of intent or not? So I don't mind adding the plans, but I don't want to add an extra recording that's not required.
So the next, and this is a pretty big thing I want to talk to you about is if you're going to allow amendments to permits, you have to, and you don't want it to be part of the public hearing, you won't want to hold a public hearing process again, then you have to be very restrictive in the bylaw over what amendments can be. So, if you want, otherwise, you're essentially bypassing the public hearing process. So, I guess part of what I want to know is what are you guys considering in terms of amendments? How do you conceive of that working? Do you want it to be where they're just starting over again, or do you want it to be where they can do a new process without as much filings, but there's still a public hearing that you call? But you know, and this is something that happens in other jurisdictions as well. You know, with planning or whatever, where you can't. Any substantive amendment requires a new public hearing. So if you don't want to require that, then you're talking about amendments that are like, you know, Scrivener's errors or minor tweaks that Mark discovered in the field that have no broader substantive impact. And it's just reflecting some like a 5-foot change somewhere that was found on the ground after the fact.
No,
So
I think we should follow the lead that's already been established, and that would be planning, which leaves it to staff's discretion on de minimis changes, more than saying amendment, de minimis changes. But if staff deems it more than de minimis, got to refile and have a
yeah,
public.
so and that really is not something that would be reflected in the bylaw. That's what that essentially is enforcement discretion. Is Mark going to go, oh, I'm going to, like, if they go 3 feet outside of this, am I going to enforce it or not? Or, you know, bring it to your attention, as opposed to it being an official decision that Mark issues. And that's kind of like how planning, I believe, works as well, that it's more about, are we going to push this issue?
Planning, you know, let's say I have site plan review, I get it approved by allowed. Site plan review allows what I want to do. And then they decide we have to move the curb cut 10 feet because Mass DOT says you got to move it 10 feet. Then I bring it to Christine and I say, Christine, we have to move this 10 feet. Is this a significant enough change that we have to go back and seek an amendment, you know, and do a whole new, and she makes the determination. And it's very subjective, unfortunately, because it depends on who the town planner is. But you live and you die with that. It's not a matter of enforcement, I don't think. It's a matter of
it's a matter of enforcement in the sense of, you know, you're not going to have a bylaw that says, Mark's going to, like, if it's greater than this or less than this, it requires an amendment or not. What you're basically saying is amendments require coming back, but, you know, what constitutes an amendment is not going to be determined in the bylaw. That, you know what I'm saying? There's no way to really draft it to account for that variability.
Well,
that's my concern.
How is it done with the planning? I mean, they have that same issue that comes up all the time. People don't necessarily, as they're in the field doing the work, 6 months later, they realize some of the things that were on the plan can't be done. They have to make an adjustment. How do they handle it? I mean, we should be consistent. So the town has one way of doing it, and it's not a checkerboard quilt of things. I mean, this is procedure. And you know, truthfully, I mean, I understand, but it isn't enforcement. If I'm a developer, I am not going to just say, well, I think it's de minimis, let's go ahead. They're not going to enforce it. I'm going to want that letter from Christine O'Grady saying it is de minimis, and I keep that in my file. I'm going to want that letter from Mark Garrett saying,
yeah, but my recollection, there's nothing bylaw related that talks about the issuance of that letter.
Well, I'm going to ask for it because I'm going to say, if you agree it's de minimis, and of course, if they say no, then in that case, it's not de minimis, then I'm glad I'm going to the public hearing. Because guess what? Once the project's done, I don't want to take it down. And I don't want to be sued as the attorney for malpractice because I didn't go get the goddamn permits correct.
But site plan is also not a public hearing process. Site plan is it's a prereq to a building permit, and it's not anything that
well, I'm not familiar with the town's bylaw in that regard. I know it's a public hearing process in New Bedford. I can tell you that, and I know it's a public hearing in Fall River now because they changed it because they thought it was illegal to have the building the planning commissioner be the one who makes the determination. So it's a public hearing in both of those communities. Now, maybe it's not in Dartmouth, but my point was, I just don't want to box us in again. And if we have a thing that they file a determination and Mark might say to him, hey, I don't think this is a problem.
Well, so this is my point, is that I had it drafted to have certain limited instances where amendments could be done. Then it got revised to simply say the commission may amend a permit upon the request of the permit holder. And my point is that requires a new filing. So
I don't
either that
think
needs,
there, I agree. I don't think we should
Yeah.
amend things without, I just think there should be
Yeah.
some, the minimus standard that the staff can determine whether it's even warranting that. And to be honest, if there's an amendment, I don't see how you can do it without a public hearing.
yeah. So I'll give you the examples of what I had of what could be what would not require a new filing, which was will not have any impact on wetlands values, will not require the addition of modification of any condition, is de minimis in nature, will conform to the performance standards and design specifications, and is necessitated by on-site conditions that were discovered after the issuance of the permit. So if all of those are met, then they can get an amendment without the public hearing process. Now that could simply be Mark doing that instead. But it was criteria to be clear on, like, it is de minimis. It is going to have no impact. It is a minor site issue that arose after the fact, but it's not going to impact anything.
We typically
could just-
we typically call those field changes.
Yeah, and we could just delete that entirely. But if you want to have a reference to it, I think we need to be clear that amendments that aren't having a public hearing process are limited in nature. And so either we don't talk about amendments at all, or if we do, we need to be clear on what is and is not allowed.
Let's just delete the reference to amendments, because the way I view it, if somebody's coming in to amend it, it's going to have to be a public hearing. It's a filing. So we don't have to, we should never amend a plan. What Mark's talking about are like field adjustments.
Yes.
De minimis. That I'm fine with. I don't,
Yeah,
without,
and I don't think you need a bylaw reference to
and
that. I
we
think
don't
Mark's
even
been
know
doing
about
it.
it. It doesn't
Yeah.
come before. Mark takes care of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not about you or what you're doing, and so I don't think it needs to be in the
Yeah.
bylaw.
That's right. That's exactly
Okay.
right. We can take
All
that out.
And then because we've rewritten how, and this is the last thing I believe, we've redone how emergency matters work, and it's always going to be an after the fact filing. So I just need two timeframes filled in by you guys. The first being how quickly after they start the work or before they start the work, what is the time frame in relation to when they start the emergency work and when they have to notify Mark?
What do you think, Mark? What do you feel comfortable with?
Well, in the spirit of consistency, 60 days sounds good, but I think that's a little long in this case. I would say 45 days.
I'd agree with you there. I think 60 is a little long myself.
So 45-day notice after the fact. And then how many days within providing that notice that they have to file their after the fact application?
Right, say that again, Brian.
So they have to notify you within 45 days. And then how soon after that do they have to file their application? Or is the 45 days when you think they have to file?
No, they notify us immediately. I
So
mean,
that's my question is what does immediately mean? Is it before they start? Is within 24
Within
hours, 48 hours
48
after they start?
48 hours.
Okay.
I think they should notify within
yeah,
48.
48 hours for notification, and then they should file the after the fact in 45 days. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying.
No, not wrong. Yep. Yeah, I was like, wow, you're giving them 45 days to notify you? That's very generous.
Not that generous.
My bad.
If I recall correctly, Mark, a lot of these, they call you while it's happening. And you've been down there and
and I'm assuming most of the time they're very good about it, but we want to be able I want Mark to be able to come in and say, hey, you guys didn't notify me
I hear you.
if it
And I
happens.
think that gives them enough time. I mean, if it's an emergency, they may not think of us right away, but they should think of us certainly within 24 hours. So giving them that extra time is being generous.
And then my last question is, do you want to require them to notify you if they completed all the work in relation to a negative determination? Because right now you only require them to notify you once they complete the work pursuant to a permit. Do you want Mark to know? No? Okay. Is it? That's it. There's some other comments I had basically saying there's certain language that I think legally we can't have in there or has to change. I'm happy to talk about it if you guys want to, but if you don't, then I'm just going to tweak it to accord with what I think needs to be there legally. And they're mostly minor, and they a lot relate to bonding issues and how the bond happens. And whether or not whether it's monetary, whether it's non-monetary, those things are pretty you have limit given the fact that you cannot that there's no statutory authority of this. This is all just by the bylaw. It's more circumscribed how we can do bonding and imposing requirements to ensure the project gets done. We don't have as much leeway. But other than that, I think I have the answers I need. So what I suggest is I can have a final red line version with what we just talked about for you guys at your next meeting. And then my assumption is at that point, you guys can have a vote to pass it on to the select board for review.
Okay, if you can get it to us before our next meeting, I'd like to be able to review it before the meeting.
Sure. Yeah, this is something I can get you guys next week. Yeah, definitely.
That's fine. Yeah. If you just, it doesn't have to be the thing like we tell the applicants, it has to be in by the Thursday at whatever we get it, we get it. But if I can have the chance to review it before the meeting, it helps me.
What's are you guys meeting the week after the February break, or are you guys
February
pushing back?
27th.
Yeah, February 27th is our first next meeting. I shouldn't say our first meeting. This is our first meeting of the month.
And probably I was going to mention this at the end, but I think it's germane now. I am leaving Thursday and we'll be back next Wednesday. I'm taking a little trip to Bermuda, so will not be available to, Brian, if you get me something before, I will be gone.
No, that actually is a good time frame. So I know I'll plan on getting it to you.
End of next week will work for me.
So that you'll have it for Thursday morning to send it off to them. I think that will make sense. Okay. Anything else you guys want to tell me before I make the final tweaks?
No, I think I'm done.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Mark, I have anything else?
No, I think that is it.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mike, can I just say something? I'm sorry for the initial problems with the computer. I brought my computer down and I didn't change any settings, but I couldn't get it to work. So I'm on my phone and I'm in a very, very noisy environment. So I've had to keep myself muted, and it's hard to get myself unmuted sometimes. So I hope it didn't interfere with the process.
No, it didn't. In fact, I appreciate the fact you were here, and given the fact that Jim had to recuse himself, it's a good thing you were here. So I appreciate that. So we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second on the motion? Seconded motion. We'll do a roll call vote. Nat?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously 4-0.